welcome back to Everyday with Zach Jose, the only podcast that is done over Google Meet. Today, I have a wonderful guest, and her name is Abigail. Is it Mamone or Maimone? Maimone. Abigail Maimone. Hey, how's it going? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well myself. Just got off of a good day of work, and I'm ready to talk with one of my friends. So,
I'm excited.
Yeah, this is your first time on the pod, so yeah, that's really exciting. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Abby. I'm a senior at University of Delaware. I'm from northern New Jersey. I come from a really big family who I adore. I am a 7-wing-6 on the Enneagram. I've been involved with Young Life for about 2 years. I do a small photography business on the side. I'm studying to be an English teacher. I think that about covers my bases.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. So, you said that you'd like to talk about travel today. So you have any experience with that in the past? You're from New Jersey.
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey, but when you told me to think about things I could talk about without any preparation, and when I think about that, what a lot of the last year of my life has been, and even more than that, has just been traveling. I studied abroad in Paris in fall 2019, and just did tons of travels there. And before and after, I've spent some time out in Arizona and California with you and all of our Young Life friends. And yeah, it's my biggest passion. I love it.
So, why do you think you're drawn to travel? What about that is enticing?
My parents always laugh because, especially when I started studying abroad and I was here, there, and everywhere on the weekends, they always said that they can remember we were 5 going to Disney, and I was in the car with all of my cousins, and I was crying because I told my parents, I was like, I'm so excited to go, but I don't want to leave my house. But they're like, and that same kid is here now, in a different country every weekend. So they always say it's so funny because I really wasn't like that as a kid. I was definitely much more reserved and a little bit anxious and liked my comfort. So I don't really know when that flip switched. But something about being in new places and seeing new places and the stories you come back with and the life you can experience. I think there is a deeper sense of living that you experience when you're on the move that you just can't when you're stagnant in one place. And I think it gets you out of your own head in a way nothing else does. To be removed from everything you're comfortable from, it allows you to see yourself outside of everyone else and outside of your daily life. And that realization of who I am outside of my everyday life has just been everything for me, and just allowing me to kind of find myself and find what I love and chase it.
Wow, that's a really good explanation. So just to reiterate, you like traveling to kind of venture into the unknown and gain a better sense of self, of who you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's cool.
I feel like we're always kind of figuring ourselves out. And I think especially at our age, in college, I think I really think we're just starting to find it. And so I feel like being able to travel so much at this age, I am so grateful for that. And I am just the biggest broken record for everyone our age. Just go as far as you can, go anywhere and everywhere you can, because you won't come back the same person. And I've never met anyone who came back worse. So yeah, go figure yourself out. If not now, when? Yeah. That's another thing that's kind of come with COVID. I feel like you realize, you always say, oh, we make all these plans and everything we're going to and we want to do, and then the world stops. And we're left really grateful for everything we have and everything we've done and the possibility to do more in the future. But the world does stop for a little bit. So it kind of reminds you to seize the day.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. So you talked about spending some time in Arizona, and that's where we met. Um, do you want to talk about that? How did we meet exactly?
Yeah.
Refresh my memory.
Refresh your memory. Young Life Lost Canyon Session 3, which was my first Young Life experience ever. But it was just, oh my goodness, the best month. And it's funny, that's my only Young Life camp experience thus far. So it's really interesting, like talking to all of our friends at camp who say like that usually doesn't happen the way like we've all stayed in touch. And I wouldn't know in my head. This is just this is just how it goes. But yeah, that was a pretty great month.
Yeah. So we spent a month on a Young Life camp, just kind of in the middle of nowhere, just working, and then I guess finding each other there. I think that also kind of ties into like what you talked about, in the adventure like travel aspect, because we were in the middle of nowhere, right, by ourselves, um, with no one to meet but each other, and then also ourselves. So I feel like that's cool. That's a huge like I I don't know what to describe it as. It's a huge thing, and I feel like it was awesome. Yeah. Okay.
And what?
Um, let's talk about your Enneagram. You mentioned that earlier.
I love the Enneagram. I was actually introduced to it when we like signed up for camp, when we were filling out. Do you remember filling out those little like applications? And one of it said like put your Enneagram type. I had never heard of it before. So I just went and looked it up, and it told me I was a 2. I'm like, so not a 2. But just taking the test, it told me I was a 2. And then at camp, and once I started talking to everyone, and when we were at camp, I was a horse wrangler. So I was out in the barn, and we would be out there at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. There were some early mornings, and early mornings make for really good conversations. So I can remember like getting the horses ready and just being in the barn and talking about the Enneagram and thinking it was so interesting. And it's such an interesting way of like looking at yourself. And honestly, I want to say it took me like a solid year after camp. It wasn't until recently that during quarantine, honestly, that I kind of dove into it and realized that I was a 7. And the Enneagram, what I love about it is it'll call you right out. Like, it'll tell you, like, here's your deepest fears and here's your biggest flaws and, like, here's all the things, like, you don't want to admit. And it's just like, all right, come for me. Yeah. But I think it's super interesting, and I think it allows me to know myself better and know the people around me better and see why they do the things they do. And then it helps us all give ourselves and give each other grace, which is never a bad thing. So that's what I really like it for.
Yeah. You mentioned you were a 7-wing 6. What is that like exactly?
So the 7 is the enthusiast. So I feel like the biggest thing to focus on with the Enneagrams is the core fear and the core desires, which I think is like because we all can relate to different characteristics, and we're all unique human beings, no one falls completely into a category, but basically Enneagram 7s, their biggest desire is to be free and to not be caged in and to not be burdened down. And their biggest fear is then to not be free. So kind of realizing that has made me understand like why I make the choices I do, and also then it makes me understand what frustrates me and why it frustrates me, and how it allows me to like look better at my relationships. And I've made so many people in my life take this test. And yeah, it's just so interesting. My roommates and I last week were all sitting around our bonfire, and like figuring out their Enneagram types. And I've known these girls for years. And then I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense that you're a 4. Like stuff like that. So yeah, I'm grateful for Young Life for introducing me to that, because it's definitely allowed me to know myself better.
Yeah, that's really cool.
What's your Enneagram?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
I'm a 2, I think wing 3. So the 2 is known as the helper, and I think that's kind of spot on with, what I've been and what I want to do. Um, I don't know. I'll talk about myself. Yeah, I have always, been a big brother growing up as long as I can remember, really. So helping out my sisters whenever they got, hurt or had homework troubles or needed like a shoulder to sleep on during long car rides, I was always there. Um, Growing up, I liked helping people, really, and I wanted to be a teacher. So I feel like there's a lot of that shows itself. Earlier on, though, when I first discovered it, I think I was like on the tail end of high school, and there was this girl who was super into it. I met her through Young Life, and she was on fire for it, kind of like a little bit like you are now. But instead of like pushing people to take the test, she would go out and like say what you are just on the spot. And she went up to me, she said, "Zach, you're a 7." And I thought to myself, I don't know what that means, but okay. And I looked it up and I was like, I think so. Like, uh, doing doing what I did in the tail end of high school, I was always involved in everything. Clubs. Um, I was I led Young Life. I sang music for some of my classes. I like to think that I was an enthusiast. I was out there to get life, by the horns. But um, when I look back on it, now, I really wasn't a 2, even though or I really wasn't a 7, even though it kind of looked like it. Uh, the reason why I was in those clubs, why I was singing music for all those people, why I was like leading others, is because I wanted to help them. So I like the Enneagram because it'll take 2 people who do pretty much the exact same thing, but it can place them in different numbers because of like the ulterior motives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Myers Briggs, the 16 personalities. It'll take what you do, and it'll place you in a box because of that. The Enneagram takes what you do, but I feel like they also include your motives or your desires behind your actions. So I like it because it counts that as well. That's kind of, yeah.
No, that's super interesting that you say that because, like I said, I originally, when I just took the test, which I also have to say I think is incredibly inaccurate, and I would encourage anyone who wants to learn more about their Enneagram to just start reading about them.
Mhm.
And if you're going to take the test, take like the 3 or 4 that you type really high as and just read about them because this isn't like it'll tell you exactly what you are. But like I said, I typed as a 2, which is super interesting because I think a lot of times I did and still do act like a 2. I have a huge family and I have friends I adore, and I'm the first person to be there for everyone. But it was interesting because then once I kind of figured out my type with who I truly am, again, outside of all the other influences in my life, I think that comes a lot more from the wing 6 aspect, out of a place of deep, deep loyalty, more than
Mhm.
it does about just being helpful. Um, so again, that's like you're saying, I think the Enneagram is cool because it shows you your desires and your motivations more than just your behaviors.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I kind of like it. I didn't at first, but I kind of do. So, and I won't ignore the fact that you and everyone else in that Young Life summer session kind of helped me bring back into it. So it's good. It's good. Um,
It was a really interesting thing to do at summer staff because, at least for me, I felt it was definitely also an intense period of transformation and figuring myself out.
yeah.
I got really lucky with when I did it. It was at such an interesting time in my life because I came back from camp, and 2 weeks later to the day, I left for Europe. So I like wasn't preparing to go to school. I wasn't preparing to go back to work. Like to me, it was almost like it was like the coming, like the oh my goodness, the words. You know when you're in the movie theater and it's like the coming attractions. Camp
Yeah.
felt
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
coming attractions to this like awesome movie I was about to go see. So I was just in a place of such excitement and I felt like I had everything in front of me because I did. And it was just really allowing me to start stepping outside of myself, and really going through that kind of personal transition at the same time as meeting the most incredible people and being able to serve in. Oh, I just am so grateful every day, for what we did at Lost Canyon, because it's a really incredible experience. And it kind of allowed me to define what Christian community meant to me, because that was like my first, through college, like after high school, that was my first like religious, even though I don't like love that word,
Mm-hmm.
experience. And it blew it out of the water. So yeah, camp was really cool in that sense. To be working with the Enneagram during that time was just really, really cool to see.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and I think I'd like to talk about, that religious aspect. Where, or, I mean, yeah, where do you think Jesus and Christianity kind of ties into that? Like, where do you think it fits in all that, the Enneagram, yeah, that community that you've built, and just, I guess, in your life in general in the last year and a half? Where do you think that's gone?
Well, I mean, with where I'm at in my life now, Jesus doesn't tie into everything. I think everything ties into Jesus. Um,
That was good.
but thanks. Um, but yeah, coming to Young Life, I truly and honestly don't know how I got there. Really grateful I did, but couldn't tell you how that happened. But to give you a little like background on my like religious upbringing. So I was raised Catholic, but my family, like I have wonderful parents. I adore my family. Aren't like super religious. My grandparents are fairly like go to their little convent church every Sunday, Catholic religious, but no one else in my family really is. So my mom like always took us like to church growing up, and wouldn't just go on Christmas and Easter. We definitely went more than that, but it was never shoved down my throat, which I think is a lot of people's experiences with Catholicism. So when I say I used to be Catholic, it wasn't a bad experience or shoved on me in any sense like that. But it was always something I was really curious about. I never minded going to church. I always enjoyed it, always had more questions. Always, like, I've always believed in a God. I never haven't. But and then once I got to high school, I got involved with our youth ministry there. I went to public high school, but at our Catholic church, and met some friends who are some of my closest friends from home to this day, like really, really incredible people. It was a Franciscan Catholic church that I was brought up in, which is really interesting because it's very based on service and community outreach and everything like that, which is super close to my heart. I also grew up with my family working with Salvation Army, so I got to see that at home. And yeah, got involved with my youth group in high school, which was a good experience. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm really grateful for the people I met and the friends and the mentors who are still mentors to me to this day. But I definitely didn't. Our youth group didn't do a great job, I feel like, at really incorporating Jesus. And I think a lot of that was the sense that they wanted it to be more like a social haven for kids. They wanted it to be super welcoming and open, which it absolutely should be. And they never wanted, like, they would always say, like, bring your friends, like Wednesday nights is when we'd like meet and everything like that. But we never, we never talked about God. We talked about God twice a year or three times a year on retreats, which really isn't enough. Really interesting. Like, we never, and I totally get that you never want to like shove it on anyone. Um, and I'm a seven. I never want anything shoved on me. But I also think to be in a youth group setting, like the essence is that you want to help lead kids to Christ. And well, I think I like sort of. I definitely started my relationship with Jesus there. I more had a relationship with the people there. I never felt like my relationship with God was super deep. Um, and yeah, went through high school. Towards the end, there was a lot of like turmoil in the ministry in general. And it definitely wasn't great at the end, and kind of definitely left a bad taste in my mouth towards like religious communities and Christian communities, and certainly Catholicism. And so coming into college, I just kind of needed a clean break from it all. And so my first semester freshman year was definitely the farthest I've ever been from God. And not in a sense that like I was in a bad place. Like I was fine. I met my friends who are still my friends to this day. It was a good semester. But there's definitely, like a lot of partying, a lot of it kind of just doing that freshman in college, finding your footsteps kind of thing. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with any of that. I don't. But I think to do anything without God is a problem. And you will find yourself floundering very, very quickly, which I certainly did. And so that in the beginning of the spring semester, like I said, I have a huge family, and I have some family who lives down in Tennessee. And my aunt's father passed away in like a freak accident. And I just felt like I have little cousins down there, and a bunch of my family members were going down, but there was no expectation that I had to go down. But I just kind of felt like I should, mostly for my little cousins. I'm close with them, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go down. I missed like 3 days of school, which, as a college student is certainly nothing small. It's a lot of catch up, but went down to Tennessee, and my family down there, and my aunt and her dad do triathlon. My aunt has done a bunch of Ironman. She's now a coach, and she guides a blind triathlete. So she's just a powerhouse of a woman. But yeah, have her on the podcast. She's so cool. But so I went down there, and they had a celebration of life. They're not super religious people. But their parents were so cool. Like, lived like all in different places growing up. They lived in India for a while. A lot of different like influences from different religions and different lifestyles, and this people who have really seen the world, which I just love. And at the celebration of life, people were really talking about how Volker helped them learn to did triathlons with them, and they're like, I never could have done an Ironman, and then I did one within a year. It's really cool stuff. And I was at just like a kind of a roadblock in my life. I felt kind of lost with where I was at. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe this would be a good distraction. I was pretty inspired being down there. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna start training. I'll do a triathlon. So yeah, so it's the 7 in me. I'm telling you, I was probably, and now would be the least prepared person to ever do a triathlon. But once I'm sold, I'm sold. I'm gonna do it. So I went back to school. And on one of the first days I was back at school after Tennessee, I decided to go for a run. And we have this reservoir. It's like a 3-mile loop from my dorm room. It's like a good starting point. And it's like early March, it's freezing, and I go on this run, and I wish I could remember the total ins and outs of it, but it's probably a God thing that I don't. But I had my earbuds in, and I don't remember if it came on or if I had to have turned it on, but I just kind of had a desire to listen to some of those worship songs that I remembered from retreats in high school and everything else that I hadn't listened to in months, as I'm walking up this hill. And then I feel just the biggest gust of wind at my back. And I remember looking up, and the trees weren't moving. There was no wind, but I swear the wind I felt pushed me up this hill. And I get to the top of the reservoir, and honestly, the best way I could describe it is a walk with Jesus. I to this day, I can't describe what happened that afternoon. And the interesting part too is that was the closest encounter I've ever had with God, easily. But it's not like your life changes in an instant. It's not like you have this huge moment and then everything looks different. It took me months after that to open up my Bible again, and really honestly learn how to read my Bible, because I never knew how to read it. We never really did it in high school, and I don't come from a super religious family. Worship music was such a lifeline to me during that time, and really bring me back to Christ, and it still is. Worship music is a really big thing to me. And yeah, then I just slowly but surely got plugged in with a church down here, and kind of figuring it out. And one of the last things that was that I was hesitant about was kind of finding that community again, as far as like religious peers. Because like I said, I was involved with it in high school, and it was a great experience. Some of my best friends to this day are from that, but I also saw a lot. I saw a lot of hurt through those kinds of communities. And it definitely, I was hesitant about kind of allowing that back in my life. And so I'm like, you know what, this summer, maybe I should go on a service trip. I loved them in high school. What if I just find like a service trip to go on? I start Googling like service trips, whatever, and Young Life pops up, right? So I'm like, oh, this looks cool. Like horses. I grew up riding horses. Arizona. I love Arizona. I went on a road trip there with my mom freshman year. So, and to give context, this is about a year later after the whole reservoir thing. So this isn't like months after. Like it was definitely a slow transitional process. And I'm like, oh, this looks cool. So I just like fill out the application thinking it's like a service trip and submit it. And a couple months later, get an email. And I remember I wanted to go to the Frontier Ranch because I'm like, oh, I've never been to Colorado. Like I'd been to Arizona, but I'd never been to Colorado.
Right.
And at the last minute, I just felt like something in me, and I was like, no, I'm putting Arizona first. And I regretted it. I remember regretting it for weeks. I was like, dang, I really hope I get the, sorry.
You can curse.
I really hope I get the Colorado one because I've never been. It looked so cool. I don't know why I switched the Arizona one, but yeah. I ended up getting selected for Lost Canyon and literally showed up having no idea what I just got myself into. Like I was assuming everyone else was walking into this like me, just like on this like outside service trip. Like I had never heard of Young Life. I had no idea what it was. I had no idea it was such like a national thing and that you guys all like eat, sleep, breathe Young Life at home. Like,
right.
Yeah, not the culture shock was like very intense. The first couple days I was like really just making sure I didn't join a cult. Like, but I showed up and I was like, oh wow, these people are like, Zach, put yourself in my shoes. Okay. Day one, and then you're in the dining hall and everyone stands up and starts church clapping. Imagine how culty that looks.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then once I realized, and it took a couple days, I'm like, oh, so this is different. It ended up being the best kind of different I ever could have asked for. I loved it. It really helped me solidify. I had like, once I kind of came back to Christ, so that was March 2018, I knew Catholicism wasn't what sat right with me. And no shade on it for other people. It's how I was raised. I'm not calling it right or wrong, but it certainly isn't for me, and it's certainly not how I encounter Jesus. So I'd known I was a Christian, and being part of a non-denominational Christian community was like really, really amazing. And it just allowed me to further understand my own beliefs because I didn't have anyone like that in my life. And yeah, meet the most amazing people that I've now spent like weeks and months on end traipsing the West Coast with.
Yeah.
So yeah, and since then I've spent a week out in LA and San Diego with all of you guys, and then I spent over a week with a couple of our Young Life friends, going from Washington to like mid-California. So we did a whole little quarantine road trip. But it's been such a blessing, and the people have been such a blessing.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. I didn't actually know that, but that whole like, I guess, series of events is what a weird little thing to happen.
It really is amazing, like how it all works out, and like the fact that I just Googled Young Life and it worked out like that, and you feel the nudges, I think, of God telling you where you're supposed to go. And the more I understand God and talk to him like a friend, the more I feel the nudges. And they've never been wrong. They certainly weren't here. So.
Wow, that's awesome. That's so weird. So meeting you've never like when I first met you, when I first got there at Lost Canyon, I was like, oh, everyone's on the summer staff. You know, they're plugged in with Young Life at Home. They have a leader. They're doing everything they can to be in this. But that's crazy. I ended up telling you the Toaster story about a camp that you've never been to, and you were just with me on that every second. That's good, man. I'm so proud of you, Abby. You're such a cool person. I'm so happy to have you on this podcast.
You are too kind. You are way too kind.
I am. Yeah, no, I'm happy for you to be here. We've been going for a bit. Is there anything else you would like to talk about that you want to put on the pod, or just in general?
Oh goodness, I feel like I can go in a million directions with that. Yeah, just in, I guess, talking about camp, and then when I look at just July to July of 2019 to 2020, and all the places I went and the things I did and the people, I would just, for anyone listening, I would just encourage you to go and figure it out as you go, because you're not going to figure it out any other way. Don't bother planning, because you're going to change anyway, and give yourself the space to do so. I would just encourage anyone to jump in the net will appear, because it turns out it's been working pretty well for me. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for coming on the pod, Abby.
Thank you for having me.
And I know you mentioned a photography business, but I mean, is there any like way we can get in contact with you, or just like follow you on any like socials? Do you drop any like sick Twitter tweets? Or
yeah, so I do have a photography business, Film and Ferns Photography, and I love it. So you can find that at Film and Ferns on Instagram, or www.filmandferns.com. Or personally on Instagram at Abby K May, ABBYKMAI, for some sarcastic commentary. So that's about all I got.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, and yeah, have a good one.
Thanks for having me. You too.